So, I mean, let's then paint the picture to wrap up of our view of Jesus and our views of the second coming. So,
well, you've already described the second coming and what Jesus' position was. So, how would you relate that to what's happened today?
Well, before I answer that, if I may, I just want to discuss what Jesus' narrative was, or what Jesus' story was, because I think that's important, how we view that. Because a lot of people will be thinking, okay, but didn't he die on the cross? Didn't he ascend to heaven? How can we, if he's in heaven, how come he doesn't come back? Right?
Didn't he ascend to heaven?
So
I'm sure that happened.
Well, I mean, briefly, and we're not going to cover this in depth. We're just going to lay out the narrative here. Our view from the Gospels themselves, from an informed understanding of religious history as a whole, and from the Quran, is that Jesus came as a man and a prophet, the final prophet to the children of Israel, the Messiah that was prophesied throughout Jewish history. And he said to people,
the final prophet from among the children of Israel, not the final prophet to the children of Israel.
Sure, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. He said that I have been sent from God, I've come to reform you, and that you shall see no sign of my truth except for the sign of Jonah. Very important point which he emphasized several times in the Gospels. Sign of Jonah, of course, is that when Jonah was thrown out into the sea, he was saved by the whale taking him up and giving him sanctuary. And Jesus says that you shall see no sign except for the sign of Jonah. Then another place he says, as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth, I believe is the quote.
Yeah.
So he speaks about that he'll have similarity to Jonah. Now, Jonah's story is very, very clear. If you read the story of Jonah in the Bible, it's very clear that in a time when Jonah thinks that he's going to die, he is saved from basically certain death through an incredible miraculous means. At no point, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, peace be upon him, founder of the Ahmadiyya community, was at pains to point out, at no point did Jonah die.
Yeah.
He was alive throughout. So
it wasn't a story of death and resurrection. It was a story of survival in the face of death.
Right. So Jesus emphasized, this will be my sign. And at one point he says, there will be no sign shown unto you except for this. Right. So this must have been his major sign. That when I will appear to be with, moment from death, God will save me through miraculous means and I will survive.
Yes.
Now, our belief, and I won't go into in detail, is that he was put on the cross, but he was only up there for between 3 to 6 hours, probably about 3 hours.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough to kill a young, fit man. He then survived, so he fell into a swoon or into a coma. He was taken down. He fainted, yeah. He was taken down. He was his followers applied healing aloes to his wounds, which is well documented, including by a doctor, well documented in the Gospels. He then recovered in the sepulchre and came out, and many people then who saw him, the Bible talks about, then believed in him, because it became suddenly Jesus that they said they would kill him. Right? Yeah. The Jews and the Romans tried to kill him. He survived, and that was his sign. He said, I will survive, because that's the sign of Jonah. He survived, and then he fled east, because he said, that I have come also for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and they will hear my voice, and there'll be one flock and one shepherd. That he will go to them.
Yeah, and the key point is that, he comes out the sepulchre, he's got wounds in his hand, and his disciples say, is it really you, or are you a ghost? So they say to him, look, what does it mean to say, are you a ghost? It means, am I seeing you post-death? That's what it means.
Yeah.
Right? That's the definition of a ghost. Am I seeing you post-death? And he says, no, I'm not a ghost. Feel my hands and feel my wounds, because a ghost does not have flesh and blood as I have. And then to confirm to them that he is actually in his original same body, that he is a human being who has not died, he asks them if there's any food that he can eat. In other words, he's in a protein deficient state. He needs to do a bit of wound healing. The
ICU doctor coming out on you.
And he needs some decent fish and honey. That's what he gets.
Yeah, and that's doubting Thomas before that, putting his hand in his wounds.
So the greatest evidence that Jesus didn't die is that he didn't die.
you've seen it live.
Well, no, that it's an absurd scenario, isn't it, really? Because if, for example, I take the question of Jesus completely out of the picture and I say, I know somebody, apparently, and there was an assassination attempt against him, and everybody thought he died, but then he was seen walking around 3 days later with the gunshot wound, healing, and he had a dressing on it. And I went to him and I said, my God, mate, am I seeing a ghost? And he goes, no, mate, ghosts don't have bullet holes. Okay. What does that mean? It's the exact opposite of what the Christians have derived from it.
Yeah. And what Paul actually stated.
We can go into that. But the brilliant thing I love about it is that, Occam's razor is so powerful in this instant that you cannot deny the fact that anybody who has seen post-assassination attempt with the wounds of the assassination attempt, the simpler answer, and who deny being a ghost and who try and eat your food, the simpler answer is they did not die. And the fact of the matter is that Jesus suddenly disappears. And the explanation that's given 200 years later in the Gospels, which doesn't appear in any of the early Gospels, it pops into existence about 250 years after Jesus' existence, is that he ascended to heaven. And the assumption on the part of the Catholic Church is the doctrine of assumption, that they assume that Mary also went up to heaven with him. I mean, the funniest belief I've ever come across, maybe apart from that dude from Vice, to have a whole doctrine called the doctrine of assumption, that we assume that Jesus' mother went up to heaven as well, because she disappears. It's an obvious gap in knowledge, and what happened? Well, I'm sure you're going to cover that now.
Well, it's all in line. The thing is, this is, we do not mean any disrespect to Jesus or his followers. And in fact, we are doing utmost respect to Jesus, because we are saying that the prophecies that he made were fulfilled. He said that you will see the sign of Jonah, right? The sign of survival. Yeah. He survived. And then he said, I will go and speak to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. 10 tribes were not where he was. 10 tribes were scattered in the east. Right? Yeah, so what happens? Described. Inference to the best explanation. What is the simplest thing? What is the best explanation here? Did he just go up to heaven, a completely unwitnessed event which has so many things don't really make sense of it? Or does he actually fulfill his prophecy and say, actually, I will go to the east and I will preach to them? And then in the 1st century AD, throughout Buddhist and Hindu scriptures, you have people talking about a fair-skinned Messiah who's traveling with his mother and preaches a doctrine of love, and he's come to be a spiritual teacher.
Claims he was born of a virgin who was persecuted in his land and who escaped and who was saved by God.
And you have, in various parts of, for instance, Kashmir, people who still to this day ascribe belief in a great teacher called Yusuf, who they say was Jesus, who came to them after the crucifixion and was buried there. And actually, this is a picture of the famous Rose Bowl in Kashmir.
You said that like such a public school boy. Rose Bowl. Rosabal.
Rosabal. I discovered it in my recent expedition. From Mr. Connolly. He set me up. So here we have the Rose Bowl of Hazrat Yusuf and a great saint, a Muslim saint there. And actually we have a video. Shall we play the video which talks about this?
Yeah, and it's from the BBC, so it's got to be true.
It's got to be true. So let me just get that up. It's from a BBC documentary talking about these people, and the great thing is, we've been looking into this more recently as well. Although it's been, the writing's been on the wall since Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad wrote that book, Jesus in India, and he was the great pioneer of this, and he claimed that divine revelation ultimately brought him to this truth. But as time has gone on, you've only had more evidence that actually there are these people in Kashmir and in these areas who ascribe belief in Jesus and say that this is exactly what happened, and you have written oral testimony for that. But let's go to the BBC to ratify everything that we're saying.
And we have to ask the question, where would he go? And you just look at a map. Palestine is on the far eastern border of the Roman Empire. If you go west, you're going right into the heart of Roman territory, where we have our 15 legions stationed around the world. If you go east, you're crossing over into Parthia, and you're going towards Persia eventually, and India and Afghanistan, that direction.
But apart from escaping rearrest, why would Jesus travel east? And how would he get there? If Jesus did want to travel east, away from the Roman Empire, the journey from Israel was surprisingly easy by land or by sea, on the Silk Route or the Spice Route. It's an accepted fact, for instance, that the disciple Thomas travelled to India and founded a Christian church there.
The great tradition of the Indian church is that it was founded by Thomas the Apostle. To travel to India would be no problem. He just had to go down to Gaza, link up with one of the spice trains returning, and then from Yemen get a boat to India. It would have been a very simple, easy procedure that was done regularly.
But if Jesus travelled or returned to the east, surely there would be legends like those in the south of France to support the idea. And of course there are such traditions. The people here in Kashmir call their tribe Ben-e Israel and claim to be descendants of the lost tribes. And here there are stories that the 1st century preacher Isa, known locally as Yusasaf, meaning leader of the healed, returned to Kashmir in his 30s. Yusasaf's ministry here can easily be seen as a continuation of the Jesus ministry. And in a local temple called the Temple of Solomon, there used to be an inscription which told of Yusasaf's claim around the year 50 AD to be Jesus, the prophet from Israel. Kashmiri history books tell us that Yusasaf came from abroad. He was a prophet and a messenger. He came from Israel. He came to spread his teachings. He lived and died here. He is Jesus. He is Isa. The meaning of Yusasaf is the healer. Another meaning is the shepherd, one who teaches others. And our history books confirm that Isa was known as Yusasaf here in Kashmir. Yusasaf continued to teach and preach in Kashmir until he died around the year 80 AD. He was buried in Srinagar. And this, they say, is Yusasaf's tomb. The first building erected around this site was built in 112 AD. In fact, it's now a shared gravesite. In the 15th century, the Islamic holy man Syed Nazir ud-Din was also buried here. Although both gravestones under the cloth point north-south in the Islamic tradition, the body of Yusasaf is buried beneath in a grave dug east-west in the Jewish tradition. Next to the sarcophagus are 2 carved footprints. The marks on these are said to be the symbolic representations of the scars of crucifixion. The footprints were carved as a sign. The scars are clearly visible, received when he was nailed to the cross. They show that this is the same person who came from Israel and that he lived and died here. You won't find any footprints like these anywhere else in Kashmir. We don't have that tradition. The position of the scars, just behind the toes, do not match each other, but they would align if a single nail was driven through both feet, with the left foot placed over the right. There are many who believe this tomb to be the tomb of Jesus. If this is the tomb of Jesus, then he spent most of his life in the mountain kingdom of Kashmir. He did not die on the cross. There was no resurrection. He did not ascend into heaven, and he does not sit at the right hand of God. For many Christians, this would be the end of Christianity as we know it.
I'm not even, I can't even hear the audio on that clip, and I've watched it so many times, I know exactly when the funky Kashmiri music is starting.
I mean, it's an amazingly well put together documentary, actually, and I think it pretty much ends there. And it basically concludes on that.
Do you remember we interviewed the director of this documentary for an event a long time ago? We might be able to bring him back on, actually. I think that'd probably be a really good idea.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah. And I think it's extremely well done, and it's fairly conclusive. I think our podcast listeners should try and watch this clip that we put on, because the actual visuals really, really sell it, of how the scars line up to show that they were basically, crucified feet.
Yes. Did Jesus die on the cross, or he survived crucifixion?
That's from Coeta 44. Thank you for that. So, I mean, pretty amazing stuff, and I think that's actually an incredible. I think the West in general would greatly appreciate this understanding of Jesus.
Well, it's only been around since 1910, this idea. It seems like they haven't appreciated it very much till now.
No, but I think it's slowly becoming more known. But the thing is that much of the West is that they're quite proud of their culture and their history. But the Christian religion that's come with it, obviously it's been largely, or to a great degree, discarded, because many people feel it's irrational, the idea of three gods in one, the idea of believing in things on blind faith. It didn't accord with the scientific understanding that many in the West were developing, so it was left. But if you can actually say, well, look, Jesus was a true man, but he was a man, he wasn't God, and you can believe in Jesus and believe in his moral majesty and in the beautiful teachings which he gave you morally, without having to believe in many more far-fetched things related to, his atoning death, going to hell for a weekend, and coming back, and then
original sin.
Yeah, and going to and then suddenly ascending to heaven, and the idea is going to come back in the rapture.
Yeah.
If you can actually still believe in a prophetic figure who gave you moral guidance, but actually he died in a naturalistic way, like everyone else, then I think that's an extraordinary way for them to really reclaim the Christian aspects of their heritage.
No, I fully agree, 100%. And I think that this ties together nicely, because what did Jesus say about his second coming? What did Jesus say about the second coming? He said that John the Baptist was the second coming of Elijah. Elijah, that means Elijah was dead. Right? Yeah. So when Jesus says he's going to come again, what does it mean? It means he's going to die. Okay, because that's Jesus. That's not our understanding. That's Jesus's understanding. It's not in our books. It's in the New Testament.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Jesus's understanding that the second coming means somebody else is going to come, which means the first person is dead. Right, which means you better start looking for his tomb. And here it is.
And looking for the one who came in his spirit and his power.
Yeah, and I think it's really significant, actually, the historical parallels between the Jews setting up the state of Israel and becoming more extreme, after Jesus' coming, and Muslims in today, and the formation of, for example, these kinds of extremist movements. There are so many extremist movements. People think of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They're the most extreme. There are actually a whole panoply of extremist movements from, Jamaat-e-Islami to a wide variety of them, across the board, in various countries. So the reality is that these have all been set up after the coming of the Muslim Messiah, because he also, like Jesus said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar and render unto God that which is God's. And he set up a movement, the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, which is purely apolitical. In other words, it has nothing to do with politics. and it is a movement that supports the separation of mosque and state. So we do not believe that Islam should be the ruling government. It should be the religion of the government. The government should be without a religion. It should be a secular government. This is what he taught us. Okay, so the parallels are striking, and it's interesting. And this is the last thing I'll say on the matter. That's probably a lie, but this is one of the last things I'll say on the matter, which is that, you know,
not the first thing.
All of these discussions we've been having, that Christians believe that the second coming will occur, Jews believe that the Christ will come, Muslims believe that the second coming will occur. They all believe that all of these signs have been fulfilled, and then the person's going to come. Whereas actually that's backwards. Okay, the signs always come after the person appears. And the reason they come after the person appears is because they act as a testimony. They're also called in religious scriptures witnesses. Each sign is a witness. You can't witness something that hasn't happened yet. You can only witness something that's happened. Okay? And the reason they are there, the reason the signs come, is to make it easy for the ordinary person who doesn't read religious texts to say, that's pretty obvious. You know, that sounds like that prophecy I've been being told since I was a child. Right? Oh my good, Burj Khalifa. Oh, that reminds me of a hadith I read. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, the tallest building in the world built by Bedouin Arabs. These are signs that happen after the person appears to clarify that he's come and that this person was true. Because otherwise, if the person comes after the signs, then actually any Tom, Dick and Harry can stand up and say, that sign, it was for me. In which case, the sign doesn't actually clarify anything. It actually makes it more ambiguous.
Because there are signs and you don't know to whom they belong. So when you see the sign, search for someone who's already claimed.
Exactly.
And you know, we would say that these signs appeared in the life of the Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the founder of the Ahmadiyya community, and then obviously afterwards as well, they were further fulfilled. After him, so many different signs of different characters. That's a very important point. So I mean, I hope what we've tried to do is show that an understanding of religious history is key, and understanding religion in general is key because it informs world events in such a profound way. But of course, that's the lowest level of it, if you will. If you're just looking to understand worldly events, then I mean, you need to understand these different trends. But if one is actually looking to, you know, understand your place in the world and understand or think about whether religion could be true, I think people should look into this more rational and naturalistic, in a sense, understanding of religious scripture, and actually an understanding of religious prophecies that accords better with the prophets who made them and the things that they said and the things that have happened before. How have things happened before? Same way that they've happened before, God's going to do that, you know, going to follow the same method that he used before again. And I think for us and other Muslims in the Ahmadiyya community, it's a very heartening thing to have, even just intellectually, to have a religious faith which is extremely rational and which one can actually fully justify, and which isn't fantastical, and yet which is no less spiritual. That is so coincidental that our show is called Rational Religion. I can't believe that that's actually lined up. It's like the stars have aligned. I mean, what was the name you originally gave the platform? Let's not go there. Slightly more militant. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss before we go? No, I think that's a wrap. So that's the exact line I use with my patients in my psychiatric clinics. Anything else you wanted to discuss before we? Yeah. No. Okay. Cool. So thank you very much. I'll look at the camera now. Thank you very much for watching our debut episode of the Rational Religion Show, or listening to us on the podcast platform which you're using, which we will discover and upload it to. We have many more episodes lined up. We're going to be doing this pretty much weekly. Our next one's going to be on the Black Lives Matter issue and the issue regarding race and class that we're all encountering these days. And we're going to be discussing many more things, including the themes that we've discussed here about the Jesus' second coming and religious history, and so much more. So if you enjoyed this and you're watching on YouTube, please do give us a like, give us a comment, subscribe, and hit the bell, please. We'd really appreciate it. And any feedback generally on this show or this format would be much appreciated. I also accept Western Union. That's great. Thank you for that. No problem. Input. No problem. So until next time, Thank you very much, and peace be upon you.
Peace be on you.